let's go ahead and get started. So here's the plan. The plan is we are going to go through each of your underwriting models today and give you a chance to explain how you came up with the variables that you came up with regard to the factors for analyzing it, how you set up the weighting, how you, in essence, came up with everything. Okay, so you're just going to walk us through sort of step by step. Everybody has the opportunity to ask questions, that sort of thing. We're not going to go in any particular order except that RJ and Paul are going to go first.
Do we come up?
Yeah, you're going to come up. And then what you can do is go ahead and just email me your model. That way that we can pull it pretty easily on my machine. And if you dare get me infected with a virus, we will not be happy. Okay. So let's. Is everybody here? Are we still missing anybody?
Yes, Jarvis.
Where's Fina?
Yeah, we're still missing a couple of people.
All right, so this is our loan underwriting decision calculator. The way we went about doing it was we used drop-down tabs here. So we set a range, and then below, we'll get into why, like what the scoring criteria was, but we just gave drop-downs, and everything just sort of populates itself. Let me see if I can get it down. Just change it up. So things would change. As you can see down here, everything just sort of populates itself as we change.
Okay, so let's go a little bit slower than that. Let's start up with loan to value. Okay, so explain the logic behind each of the drop downs.
Okay, here you go. I'll just pull this down here. So here's our scoring criteria based on each. So LTV, or Paul, you want to get into
Well, okay. All right. I have to go back to the criteria, but the selection for, these are the criteria that we picked on the bottom here, the 10 criteria. And we did it in kind of order. The first one we did was loan to value, and the second one was the debt service coverage ratio. Reason being are those are mandatory, regulated by the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, the Treasury Department that regulates banks. And those are instituted by the banks for risk management, for credit risk, for a borrower defaulting on a loan. So those are the two that are required. And
we had the highest score to be an LTV below 60, just because it's less of a risk to the lender, and then the least scoring here would be an 80 up. In those instances here, the range is from 100 to 70, and the reason we did from 100 to 70 instead of maybe 100 to 0 is we didn't want to give you a failing grade essentially for simply just having an 80 plus LTV loan, because I mean we would still take it, we would still do the loan, it would just have worse terms basically, higher interest rates and whatnot. So basically the way we did this, anything over a total score of 70 we accepted, anything below we would decline. And then as you can sort of see from our decision-making criteria, here was sort of a table, and whatever your total score was, and here, self-populated, based on where it was up in these boxes. So I'll just see if I can get it down to we'll go up each, whatever, see how see if I can get to a failing grade here. There we go. So as you can see, it is under 70, so the decision was declined. Therefore, these cells do not get populated because it's irrelevant. The moment we go over 70, let's just try to get it in like a 72 or something like that. 70. So over 70, we see it's approved because it's over 70, and here are the terms that follow the guidelines here in the basic criteria. And I'll see if I can just.
well, because you're considered a higher risk at that score based on the criteria, you're going to have higher interest rate, loan origination fees, and prepayment penalty probably higher than what somebody who has a better credit score.
Right. So like here we get with these terms or with these inputs we got a score of an 83. So if you follow here, it's approved, 8%, 8%, 1% loan origination fee, 2% prepayment penalty. And then the way we organized our calculator here was from our point of view, top being most important or highest weighted, down to low, which we saw as the least important or lowest rated factors. Our highest ones, we had LTV, DCSR, credit score for the tenant. We viewed as the most important.
Right, because the creditworthiness of the tenant is where the lenders are focusing on now.
Then our next sort of middle importance here, we have loan value, or loan amount, vacancy rate, lead certification, based off, here are your sort of, silver, or platinum, gold, silver, top being the highest scored, not certified being the lowest scored. After that, building class, A, B, and C, property type, industrial, we viewed as the least risky, down to retail being the most risky.
In the market, as of right now, industrial seems to be
and then next, our two bottom here, we have debt yield ratio, and the credit score for the borrower. And credit score for the borrower these days just is not as relevant as the tenant, because essentially the tenant is the one at the end of the day, paying the bills. So we took that in consideration, and we made the credit score of the borrower down towards the bottom and the credit score for the tenant at the top. Maybe we'll just give you another view at our scoring criteria for the different factors.
Okay, so it's open up for questions for you guys.
Any questions?
If you ask questions, that helps you, grade-wise.
You said something about the credit score not being so high of a criteria as the renter itself?
Yeah, we said the credit score for the borrower, as the person actually trying to obtain the loan, is less relevant than the credit score of the tenants in which you're leasing it out to. We learned in class, basically the reason behind that was, at the end of the day, the tenants are the ones that are
Well, let's put it this way, the old school of lending used to be where they focused primarily on the credit score of the borrower, whereas moving now to the creditworthiness of the tenant, because that's who generates your income. So, yes, we probably could have weighted it a little higher than 5%. It is important. It is important that they have liquid assets as well. I think that's part of the stress test now that they implement the risk management. So, yeah, we could have probably weighted it a little higher.
No, I think you guys did a great job. I'm just thinking maybe the weights could have been distributed where it would have included maybe to a lesser degree the borrower and weighing more the tenants, but also incorporating the borrower.
Yeah, we did. We gave a 15% weight towards the tenant, which was greater than the 5% weight towards the borrower. So we split them up and gave them different weights based on what we believe.
So the factors that affect the interest rate and everything else, it's every factor.
Yeah, just total score.
You didn't divide this one for interest rate, this one for term, this one. Every factor affects everything.
Basically, yeah.
Okay.
Your total score.
Because I did different. That's why.
Yeah. I'm sure everyone did, a little different. But any other questions, comments, concerns?
So you also waived the fixed loan origination fee for different scores.
Oh, yes, that's a typo. We had that originally. We made that change, and I did forgot to change the typo.
Okay.
Loan to value, I made a mistake of loan to value, it should be 85%. It's 80% in the spreadsheet, so we.
Okay, 85% is pretty good. Max I got so far.
Well, no,
was
85% is the maximum loan to value.
Yeah, the maximum I found right now is 65 usually.
Well, according to regulation
Yeah.
for banks. But I was just gonna make one comment about lead. again, let's talk about forward and moving forward trends. And the reason that I see the industry, and from Dr. Forgey's lectures, from LEED, and I'll tie it into that, is because of the credit crisis from 2007, 2008, the mortgage bubble. So banks now are tightening the screws. As Dr. Forgey said, you know, they have surveillance departments that could even go that far because they want to, it's risk management against credit risk or default on a loan. So what they're doing in effect is they want borrowers to have more skin in the game or equity to lower their risk, for one. And I think based on some reading, and I'm not an expert, but they're going to be implementing probably some more regulation. One, this will tie into LEED, and it totally does make sense conceptually, because as far as tenant occupancy and what we spoke about in class, I can't articulate it very well, but it makes sense. Now also, I can get into, we did include a ratio called the debt yield ratio. That ratio it's used now, I believe, by commercial backed securities, like conduit lenders use that ratio. But from the research I did, it looks like they might have a push to implement that into commercial lending, the primary market. Just something I read in doing the research. And what that basically does is, all right, I'll just finish it right now. It's just another ratio, but it's a way of measuring risk, and it's static, where what they're saying is amortization periods and interest rates, debt coverage service ratio can be manipulated, whereas the debt yield ratio cannot. But in essence, what it basically says is the debt yield is what they would get on a return in the event of default. Does that make sense?
But yeah, we also have to keep in mind now with the way it's going with the loans and mortgages, banks are not making money from giving loans out anymore. They're going to different factors, and companies like Rocket Launcher, Quick Loans, Quicken Loans and stuff like that, those are the private companies that are giving home loans.
Well,
The destruction of regulation is kind of like going on.
well, sure, of course they're still making loans.
Then that's not where their margin is anymore. They changed their portfolio for making money.
More questions?
That's why.
So what do you think the best feature of your model is?
The best feature, I guess how everything just sort of populates itself. I mean, the whole drop down, the reason we went with the drop down tabs instead of just manually entering it, I guess from the lender's point of view, I guess just human error. So I guess the functionality of it, I would say, is the highlight of the.
So what do you think you would have done if you, in other words, what do you think is, what sort of weakness do you see with the model? I mean, what would you have done differently if maybe you could have done something differently that you maybe didn't know how to do, or?
I was trying to figure out a way, I mean, I guess it's not really super relevant, but I was trying to figure out a way to conditionally format this table here so that basically not only would it pop up, self-populate these cells, but it would sort of highlight, like maybe whatever row it came up in, the font would either turn green or the border around it would also be green. But I was just having issues inputting range within if-then statements. Up here you could get away with basically, see if you can see with here you can basically just get away with saying, you know, greater than or equal to the beginning of the range, like anything just keep going down. That wouldn't necessarily work, I don't think, because you have to populate all 4 cells. So I was just struggling with trying to find a way within Excel to, I guess, input range within if-then statements. But it was like I tried, I think it was like parentheses, the value range with a colon in between, I just, you know, I was on YouTube trying to figure it out, and I eventually just gave up. And I was like, this is good enough. Yeah.
Well, that's really comprehensive. That sounds like I mean, the fact that you guys have outlined all of your different
Yeah, it's very
variables.
clean.
It's very, very comprehensive. It's
Yeah,
like-
thank you. I mean, we could have spent a month on it trying to figure out the criteria, you know, I mean, there's,
Right.
so, I mean, we did the best we could based on the knowledge we have, which is what we've learned in class, and, you know, pick the best criteria that we thought was relevant, that maybe we could explain.
I guess another
The
answer.
model.
Sorry, go ahead. Another answer to your question is something we could have done better was just, you know, maybe more ranges. It's pretty broad, you know, under $1 million, above 25 million, and then somewhere in between. You know, we could have done that. Maybe instead of 4 categories, we could have maybe done that to 8. That's one way I maybe would have changed it or added depth to it.
Yeah, no, it would, but I mean, I think you certainly demonstrated that you understood how to create the ranges that you created, and in the sense of the process. And, you know, I understand obviously the complexity of, you know, as you add more ranges and that, you know, those if-then statements begin to be quite monstrous.
Yeah, you know, this long.
Yeah.
Just throw it in.
Well, I get it. Okay, all right, well, thank you both very much.
Okay. You want me to exit out of this? or-
Yeah, exit out of that and then pull up whoever's next in my email folder. Yeah, don't save it yet.
Read all, is this mine or is this somebody else's?
Just to cancel it, whatever it is, I don't know what it is. Okay, and then cancel, go up to the upper right and cancel that. Okay, now then whoever's next to my email hopper.
Should I go up this way?
Yeah, go up from you.
Kenneth. There you go.
And once you're up there, can you blow up those numbers a little bit so I can see them back there?
Like zoom in?
Yeah, once you do the enable editing.
All right, so we kind of, it's pretty simple, straight to the point. I guess we kind of tried to aim at making it idiot-proof, I would say. It's the same thing with the drop down here. The underwriter would pick the product. That changes the terms. So the box under here are the available terms that the bank is offering at that moment, and that's populated from here.
So just make sure I'm clear. So for each product type, then you have the different loan terms in terms of
Right.
everything from the interest rate to the debt service coverage ratio, whatever. Okay.
Right, and that box can be updated by the loan committee or head underwriter or
Okay.
whatever.
So what before you skip ahead, what are you going to walk us through what the differences are between the property types?
Sure, okay, so in my opinion, I did it kind of like you guys did based on risk a little bit. So you can see a higher risk thing would be retail, so LTV is 60% versus a multifamily, which is less risk, and you're looking at 75% there. So you can see how the numbers adjust based on risk, I guess you could say. So the underwriter would only have to really plug numbers in where the yellow is.
Gotcha.
Okay, yeah, so if you go down here, you'll see it on here, all the yellow numbers, you go in, you plug them in, with the loan to value. Immediately, if you're not getting the loan to value, you're gonna pull a no down here.
It'll give you red or green.
Yeah, it's
on
gonna
those
show red or
two.
green, or yes or no. So, that's one of the factors up here that's extremely important. So that's honestly gonna be a very determining factor in our particular model. And as you keep going down, you see the other factors that play a part. The underwriting factors are down here. Oh, okay, I was just making sure you can see them out. So we have vacancy rate, number of units, the credit score, the net worth, location, condition of property, and experience in years. So, and then if you look over here to the right, you see the weight that it holds in the total, like, even though it's a number, it's basically a percent that adds up to 100. So you can
And so what's the criteria for a yes, let's say?
It's a 60.
Okay.
The important part is the upper portion of it, because that's the number
Yeah.
section, so to even get to the lower point, obviously the numbers would have to work. So that's kind of like the filter, and then below that adds the second level of factors. The rate gets adjusted, which you can see here, so if someone comes to the table with a little bit more money, they can kind of buy down the rate slightly, and this is the and that kind of this is all auto-populated also. So a loan committee could pick the rate adjustment increment, and based on what somebody brings as far as cash, it would get adjusted. And that's really it.
So talk about like the location, condition of the property. So you've got like letter grades of C's. I'm assuming then it's like an A, B, C thing, or?
Sure, so if someone puts in, let's say it's an A location, they would get the full 10, versus if you put an F or D, let's say D, it would weight out. So they would it's just plug and play. I mean, the formulas are there, so all they have to do is put in the numbers, and the net worth has ranges. So if someone were to put in, I have 250 here, but if someone were to put in 500, well, 250. So let's put in 100 there. One of them will work. So the ranges are in this formula here.
What's your experience in years, you know?
So that's like the investment experience of the borrower.
Okay.
And what is the net worth? Is that the value of the property or the person?
That's the person. So those are borrower underwriting factors based on that
Could you
specific
all put
borrower.
in a different number than one, just to show us how?
Sure, sure. Okay, so that's the same thing.
Well,
So
okay, sorry.
there's a formula here, right? And you can see the range. If it equals 0, it's 0, they get 0 points. If it's between 1 and 5, they get half. It weights it out, so it'll be half times 10. So let's say we did 10 years experience, they get more points. The big thing that's making this a no right now is this vacancy rate. So like, I weighted that heavily because obviously it's important. I mean, if it's vacant, it's not going to pay the bills. So.
Net from your viewpoint or perspective, net worth, how do you define net worth?
Well, if you were to go get a commercial loan, they give you a series of questions. One of them would be your net worth. They'd ask you to put out everything you own, assets, whatever.
Right, but I'm coming from a standpoint of an equity position, liquid or
No,
assets?
no,
It's assets.
Assets.
liquid and
Yes,
assets.
it's-
It's your total net worth.
Okay. I was going to make one more comment. I like the way you did the amortization periods. We thought about that. We were going to try and do that, but that looks good.
Well, the loan origination up here too, that's kind of well, it is auto-populated. So that'll throw in, if you look here, again, the head underwriter could put in what they're paying their attorney at the moment.
Can you blow that up a little bit? The font is a little
Zoom in a
small
little
for
bit.
me.
Okay.
Just, yeah, there you go. Thank you.
So this would be, a head underwriter would put all these terms in. This is basically like the loan committee's sheet.
Yeah.
And they would put all their essentials in. So this is what they're paying the attorney, this is the commissions they're paying to the loan officers, which you can see there, and they can change that, that can be adjusted. And then that filters into the first underwriter sheet and calculates the loan origination fees.
Gotcha.
So this sheet basically needs to be filled beforehand by the loan committee, like the lender.
And you can see here, so this number, that's the commission, plus the 8,000
Right.
is your loan origination minimum. Now, obviously, they use that as a negotiation tactic. They could say, hey, it's gonna be 15 grand, but that's their minimum.
Okay.
Is the loan officer like a broker, essentially?
Right, yeah.
And
The
they-
person
oh.
putting the loan together.
And they get a percentage of the total?
Yeah, they get basis points. So, and the basis points are kind of based on volume of dollars in the loan. So, they're not going to pay, you know, they're going to pay less. If it's like a $10 million loan,
Mm-hmm.
they're not going to pay as high a percentage because
Yeah.
they don't want, you know what I mean? They don't
Yeah.
want to pay out a crazy amount of money. So
Yeah.
it adjusts in a range of based on the dollars that the loan is.
Okay.
And that's pulled from here, which is the loan amount, and all those numbers are pulled from these amortization. And then it auto-populates the loan origination fee in here too, so you can see the effective cost of borrowing right there.
I take it there's a lower amortization period on commercial loans
I think right
because
now,
of risk.
I don't know Dr. Corey, I'm pretty sure most of it's 25 years is the best you can get. They don't do 30-year in commercial, I'm pretty sure.
What's that last tab? Was it borrower? Down at the very bottom, you got 4 tabs down at the bottom. I'm trying to see what the
Borrower loan.
So
Right, so this is, I had to do 2 because it would it would
Override?
overlay, so I had to do
Okay.
2. So the borrower loan is, this populates this section. And the loan minimum term we put here because that populates this section to give the minimum requirements to the underwriter. So if, let's say somebody, let's just change it just so you guys can see. So it'll change the minimums here, and if somebody comes to the table with, let's say, over 100,000, it'll give a red light right there, so the
Right.
underwriter knows obviously it's not gonna work. And if there's a red in that borrow return section at all, they would know not to even go down to the second filter.
So, go ahead, Diego.
Looks great, awesome. Just a question, the borrower won't view all of your, they'll probably just view some of, or just an end result of your decision-making process here, right?
But this is, well, we built it basically with the idea that where, let's say the loan committee, and this is being handed to an underwriter, and here you go, plug the numbers in, there's nothing to it, you just plug the numbers in where it's yellow, and it'll give you a red or green light on the top. If any of them are red, it's a no. If they're both green, then you can move down to this section, and that's the second filter, with the secondary factors, basically. Because the main factors are gonna be your financial, the numbers. The bank cares about the numbers more than anything, really.
Is that, how high did you go on your debt service coverage ratio? 1.75?
Well, that's the borrower, so in this case,
Well, right.
so this is, if, they would have to plug in the NOI of whatever the borrower is bringing to them. The borrower's gonna bring a deal and say, I need a loan for this. So the underwriter then will plug in the numbers, and here they can plug in the NOI, so let's say it's 10,000 again. All of a sudden, it turns it red, and brings it down.
Okay.
Great job.
So, in terms of the direct applicability of this in a practical sort of setting, I mean, where do you do you see any other holes that you need to fill in, or?
The secondary factors are kind of arbitrary, I guess. I mean, we didn't get a lot of time to research specifics. Those were kind of off of our, we threw those in there. And then the weights. If we were to go and do it again, I think the weights, I would have added to this info sheet here, where somebody can plug in what they think is the most important as far as like a loan committee or somebody above an underwriter. But we kind of just threw in the formulas there just to get it done, I guess.
I mean, I love what you did with the property type thing. That really is, I love that piece of it, because, obviously there are differences between the property types in terms of the loans that are gonna be achieved by those, so that definitely is a big selling point of your model. I like that a lot.
Well, when you get terms from a bank, usually they give you the layout of terms for each class of property that you're looking at, so that's kind of where we started. That gave us that idea.
Yep, that's great. Other comments, questions?
Good job.
Great job. Thank you. Go ahead and close it out, and we'll, who's next in line?
We did it only on the multifamily, residential, kind of like did that, we didn't do all.
Click on the icon down below, the Excel icon. No, it's already loaded. All you have to do is click on the icon and click the one you want to pull up. There you go. You got it loaded 3 times. Okay, there you go. Now enable editing.
All right, so like Cash was explaining a little bit, we kind of have a very simple version where we kind of analyze an investment property itself, and we pretty much, so if you see it, there's an analysis of the property, and then we have the credit worthiness of the buyer. So if Cash, if you like click on it, change it. Yeah, like on the credit score. So where we set this was like anything credit score below 640 would require a debt ratio of 1.5. Anything over 640 would require a debt ratio of 1.3. And from there, we pretty much just ran the analysis of the property where the purchase price, the units, everything that you see in blue are the inputs. And pretty much everything drops after that. So we just went off hypotheticals of a 35% down payment with 65% financing. And from there, where we got our answer is where you don't see that at is the net operating income required from the credit worthiness if it's not equal to or greater than what if the net operating income at the top for the income and expenses is not equal to or greater than the net operating income required, then the deal didn't go through. And, yeah, so based off of 5% vacancy rate, the number of dwellings, the rent per dwelling.
We kind of like thought about it,
Yeah.
like, do we want to give it like an option of like servicing everybody, or kind of come up with a model that this is our lending program and you have to meet like these criteria for us to be able to lend to you in regards to the multifamily. We didn't go all the way like you guys and did all kinds of LTVs and stuff like that. I mean, put some formulas in, we tried to do it that way, to kind of put a fixed loan portion that we will only give 65%. We will not loan out 75%, for example, so that's why we didn't make that option. We said this is the criteria for us if we want to rent out to multifamily.
Yeah, but that wasn't the assignment. The assignment was to pick 10 different lending criteria and apply weights to those lending criteria.
I thought that the 10 things that we got aside that was the.
Go ahead and finish explaining.
That was pretty much it for the formula to see if the person was approved or not. If the net operating income required in the credit worthiness box was greater than the net operating income that the property produced, then the person was denied the loan.
So basically, you've got one criteria out of 10. You've used it in a credit score, and that's it. That's what I'm saying.
Because I thought we already applied like the vacancy rates, yeah, the debt coverage ratio.
But is that an input, or is that that looks like that's a fixed field?
Which one?
Debt service coverage ratio.
It will change.
It will change depending on the credit.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's not an input, then that's an output.
And then so pretty much purchase price. So pretty much we looked at the property itself and we evaluated the approval rating of the buyer based off of whatever the property was cash flowing in a sense. I know we just stayed at the extra 30 minutes. I think that would help a lot. Any questions?
Questions? Thank you. It should be there, if you go back down to the icon, and then you may have a choice there to the right.
Okay, so ours also is a very simple one. We didn't get too complex. We made it strictly for office, so you didn't get to choose. So we picked criteria, 10 different criteria, which after a little bit of research, we found for office underwriting, this is kind of what lenders would look at. The top two being debt service coverage ratio and loan to value, and those are weighted the heaviest. We did drop down. Oh no, we didn't do drop downs for those.
Yeah, we did for.
So those are actual inputs, yeah, and then as you go down, you can see the weight gets less and less and less. We did our factor score on 1 to 5, 1 being the best, 5 being the worst. So the lower your score at the end, the more likely you were to be approved. Our approval range went from 1 to 3, you got a thumbs up, and below 3 was disapproved.
And also we use formulas, the formula of F to determine the range. And we also determine the approval based on a scale of 1 to 5. Anything below 3 on the final weighted score is going to be approved, anything above is going to be disapproved.
So you want a lower score?
Lower score was the better one, yeah. And just to go over a little bit of the criteria, credit history of tenants, we just use the standard FICO score for excellent, good, very good, poor, and that would determine the factor score for their vacancy rate, obviously percentage of unused property.
That's an input.
Property condition, building was brand new. Some of these overlap a little bit too, because obviously class type kind of goes a little bit with property condition. Lease rates versus market lease rates, so what we plan on leasing the building for and what the current market is going for. Management efficiency would be like property management of the building, who's going to run it, how much experience do they have, yeah. Local employment growth, so is the employment increasing, decreasing, stable? And obviously it's office, and then last but not least we had location, which the closer you are to major transportation or the central district, the higher score you got. The one thing I wish we would have added, I wish we would have added LEED certification, which I would think of to one of you guys. That would have been a pretty good criteria because we were kind of digging for some. Then just below we had the criteria definition of each one.
Can you blow those up just a little bit, for the criteria definitions, just
Oh yeah.
Any questions?
Excited.
So talk a little bit about management efficiency.
So that would be who would plan on managing the building, property management. So if you have someone or a company, 20+ years experience, good reviews, a good rap.
We consider past projects.
Yeah, you would have a higher factor score versus somebody who's new, or if you're planning on running it yourself and you don't have any experience, you would have a lower factor score.
Well, I'm confused. I thought we did the other way around. Didn't you say that you used
I'm
higher?
sorry, yeah. You would get a 5 with less experience.
Yeah, why did you sort of choose to go in that direction in terms of the lower score is better than the higher score?
Well, initially we were trying to do it based on like kind of like a GPA, like a grade value, and we were confusing ourselves with that statement.
I mean, first place, fifth place, kind of like perspective.
Oh, okay, all right. And you said the cutoff for approved versus not approved was what?
3.
3.
So if you're 3
Below
and up, you got approved. Under 3.
No, wait. If you're 3 and up,
No, you're 3 and up, you're disapproved, you're below 3.
See, this is why it's confusing.
Yeah, and here you can
the
see
basic logic, yeah.
1, 2, and 3 approved. 4 and 5
That is,
disapproved.
Okay, all right. Fair enough. All right, let's go back over there to the to your factors for a second. Okay, so let me see here. What else we got? mean, Dustin, this is sort of I mean, obviously office buildings is kind of your wheelhouse. I mean, what other factors would you have thought that you would have put in here for underwriting an office building?
Well, it's pretty difficult to underwrite an office building right now because you require at least 25% pre-lease or pre-sale. So that's a factor that you have to look at as far as is this being built spec by an investor, which has to come up with most of the cash, which will affect your LTV, versus residential rental or something like that. Banks are throwing money at people. And as long as the underwritten rents for multifamily meet the market area, there's a whole standing audience of investors. So I guess credit of the tenant and you know, the amount of pre-lease that, you know, is available.
Yeah, pretty simple.
Okay. And I noticed that you guys, unlike the first group, you actually just limited it specifically to the credit history of the tenant and didn't put anything in there about the person seeking the loan, the borrower. And so you want to talk about that at all, other than just what kind of already been said?
The credit history tenant, I mean, I didn't think of adding, or we didn't think of adding the borrower. I guess thinking the credit history of the tenants would be enough for the underwriter.
I mean, what do you think about that,
After seeing
Dustin?
the other presentations, obviously there's stuff that we're like, oh.
Credit of the tenant?
Credit of the tenant versus the borrower. I mean, we talked about it in class as being, you know, that, you know, more of a conscious shift on the part of a lot of the lenders to really looking at the tenants and their sort of credit history versus looking at, you know, how relevant in your mind based upon what you've seen with the office market. I mean,
Well,
Is there one that matters more?
a lot of developers fail, you know, or have, you know, they go down with the market cycle. Like Califumo is a guy up in an area where I work in Palm Beach that burned a lot of people and did a lot of bad things and basically was on the run for a little while. But now he's back in the market. It's a different time in the market cycle. And so borrowers can recover from things like that if they have a longer track record of success. So, I mean, it's important as far as their ability to perform. But the credit of the tenant is largely what will dictate the terms you're going to get.
I have a question. It's not necessarily for them. It's probably more for you. But how is the tenant's credit history available for anyone, for, I guess, the landlord to see?
it would be.
Because, I mean, yeah, I mean, initially when they came on board, right? But say they've been with you for 5 years, their credit score could have changed.
Sure.
Before you go to, you know, get out a loan, you have to then go to your tenants and say, I'm taking out a loan, I'm going to need your updated credit score, sort of a thing?
In some cases, absolutely.
And that's not that's available to.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Is that an ongoing thing for the life of the loan, or is that just the initial tenants you're developing?
Every time you're going to be changing tenants, you're going to definitely have to probably pull that.
Okay.
But then, within the duration of the loan, the lender may have a stipulation that they want that information updated once a year, once every 2 years, once every 3 years, whatever they choose to kind of mandate.
Do they have ratios of what you have to keep good versus bad? Because I know that, like, startups, let's say, you know, I mean, there's plazas filled with you know, smaller tenants that are
Yeah,
startups.
and it really all gets down to that specific lender. I mean, just like you guys are obviously, you know, showcasing here, everybody looks at it a little bit differently. You know, there's not one absolute standardized, you know, approach, you know, to this process, and you know, each lender has kind of come up with their own criteria that they happen to think are the most important, you know, for that maybe particular property type, that particular market, that particular economic cycle, whatever it may be, and ultimately that is going to, you know, factor into their decision-making process.
Okay.
Diego?
Yeah, because I'm new to the industry, I just would like to know, do borrowers have access to all information or only to certain information regarding the decision-making process of the lenders?
And that's an interesting question, because some lenders are not, actually I would argue that many are not very transparent, you know, because they don't want you playing a game. you know, and you know, it's sort of like if you know precisely what their criteria are and precisely how you're going to be evaluated, then to what extent you try to basically tailor your presentation or your proposal to those terms, and ultimately, as a result, you know, fudge a little bit here and there, and to potentially try to get the loan and not really put forth your most honest effort, I guess.
And what if you felt like it was not honest or?
Well, see, and I guess, now, are you talking about from the lender's point of view, or are you talking about from the borrower's point of view?
Yeah, the borrower's.
From the borrower's, I mean, once again, what's probably going to happen as a matter of practice is if you get turned down by one lender, there's a chance that you still could be approved by another lender. It might just simply be that there are different terms and conditions that are going to be applied to you. You may have a different interest rate, you may have a different term, you may have a different set of fees, you know, and all of that, you know, and it doesn't necessarily mean that the one that you got turned down by is going to give you the best terms. You know, it very well could be the case that you get turned down by the lousiest lender with the lousiest terms, but then potentially get approved by the best lender with the best terms. You know, that's what I'm saying. There's no absolute rhyme or reason. That chances are, if we were to come up with a hypothetical property with hypothetical set of conditions, and we were to put that property into every single one of your underwriting models, you know, there very well could be the case that, you know, it gets turned down by some of them, but then approved by others. You know, but that's the point is, that, you know, you've got to understand that every lender, you know, if it's a local lender, yeah, they're going to have their own, you know, sort of specialized criteria. But if it's a you know, a national lender, they probably have a fairly sophisticated model that they're going to put all of this information into, and then ultimately spit out, well, okay, here are the terms and conditions. Okay, Fina?
On average, like, you know how if we, like, I went to apply for a commercial loan for a property. It was residential, but it was multifamily, so they looked at it as commercial, right? And the loan to value was 1.3, for example, right? So,
you mean the debt service coverage ratio?
Yeah, sorry, yeah, it was 1.3. And what happened was, what I wanted to know, like, on average, if you are, for example, you're putting down 65%, or they're giving you a loan for 65%, 70%. After that, they also have vacancies, they also have management fees. On average, it's about like 14–15% also deducted from the value that they